Welcome into the Why You're Wrong Fantasy Football Podcast, Brian. Today's episode, big targets and tight ends. Episode 13.
Exciting stuff.
Always exciting. Most exciting position to talk about, right?
Only a couple of tight ends we can talk about.
Okay. So, as always, I'm your host, the Monotone Master, and I'm here with Brian, the Fantasy Foreseer. You can find us on social media or TikTok and Instagram as Why You're Wrong FFB and Twitter as You're Wrong FFB. So today we're reviewing the projected top 10 tight ends for the 2020 season, discussing who actually just finished in the top 5, because honestly, after number 5, it's all about the same. And then we're just going to look at the early top 5 projections for 2021. So, pre-recorded episode, we can't react to news we don't know about. The top 10 going into 2020, so some of these names we all know. Some of these names are going to be like, who the heck is that? So, Travis Kelce, average draft position was 18. George Kittle at 16. Mark Andrews at 36. Zach Ertz at 41. Darren Waller at 56. Tyler Higbee, or Tyler Hig-Who, at 67. Hunter No Henry at 69. Hayden Hurst, he wishes he had a better team, at 110. Evan Ingram at 79. And Austin Hooper at 99 rounds out where the top 10 guys were drafted. But we got to break down who actually finished in the top 5. So for tight ends, I feel like you're thrilled if your tight end gets 15 plus points. So that's a touchdown, 60 yards, 6 catches, and half PPR. You're happy if he gets about 8 to 15. And then I feel like your tight end busts if he gets below 8 points.
Yeah, I agree with that. And more likely than not, your tight end probably gets less than 8 points and you get really upset over it.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, you got people like Waller, Kelce, Kittle, Andrews, who are all getting over 8 points. And those are the guys you need or your season's kind of a bust.
Yeah, they make a huge difference, which actually I'll get to at the end of this episode. So, number 1, Travis Kelce. 260 points. Averaged 17.4 points per game as a tight end. Played in 15 games. 8 games over 15, 5 games between 8 to 15, and then only 2 games under 8 points for Travis Kelce this year. So consistency, high-powered offense. His quarterback's probably favorite target, especially in the red zone. Top 5 in receiving rate for like just receivers in general. And 5 straight years as the tight end 1. Do we have anything bad to say about Travis Kelce?
Let alone he's a tight end. He's your wide receiver 1 on your fantasy football team.
Yeah.
You could draft him in the first round and he's going to be one of the best players on your team year after year. And I don't see any signs of him slowing down. I don't see his production is going to be worse next year because it's probably only just going to get better at this point. So I have nothing bad to say.
He had the quietest best Super Bowl performance ever. He had like 13 catches for like 130 something yards.
Yeah, well, Tyreek Hill had 1 catch, so that really just shows who's the alpha dog on that team.
Right. So, going into the other alpha dog on his team, the Walrus, Darren Waller on the Raiders, averaged 14 points per game, had 225 on the season. So, we all remember that one game, he went bonanzas and got 40 plus points. If you take away that one game, he still averages 12.4 on the season. So, played the full season, 4 games over 15, 5 games between 8 to 15. But then this is where you run into the issue with tight ends. Even the best ones can still hurt you. He had 7 games under 8 points.
The Raiders are just so weird. I mean, Waller is good, and you have to draft him as a top 3 tight end. But it's like the Raiders will either play games where it's like 40 to 40, or there's games where they'll they'll lose like 17 to 40. Like their defense is just so bad. That's what it is. The defense sucks. But if they can play from behind and, Derek Carr's playing great, Darren Waller's going to put up numbers and he's going to end up in the top 5 every season. It's just a consistency level of, do you trust Darren Waller every
Right.
week?
It's like one of those things like going into the season, the Raiders like showed signs of trying to like really improve their offense, drafted 2 receivers in the top 3 rounds of the draft, added Nelson Aguilar. I think the big thing was like, okay, does the offense still run through Waller? And I think as long as Derek Carr is the quarterback, the answer is yes.
Yeah, I agree because their receivers are not amazing. Like Aguilar, Ruggs, not amazing. Their run game is Josh Jacobs had a pretty good season, but then again, he hates fantasy football. So do you really want Raiders on your team?
Yeah, fair.
But no, Darren Waller's solid. I mean, you can draft him with confidence and you'll be all right.
Okay. Number 3 on the list is Robert Tonyan, 150 points. So this is where you feel the real drop off. This is 75 points less than Waller. Averaged 9.4 points per game. Played a full season. Only had one game over 15 points. It was the week he got 27 because Devontae Adams was out. 6 games between 8 to 15. And then 7 games under 8 points. So he basically averaged 3.7 targets per game. I just feel like he might not even be a top 10 tight end next season because the only reason he was up so high is because of Rodgers' outrageous year. If Rodgers regresses, Robert Tonyan will not be this big tight end that we all saw him as.
I don't like Robert Tonyan whatsoever. I didn't even like him last season too. I mean, it's literally just Devontae Adams and that's about it. And when it's not him, then it's like Lazard.
Yeah.
And when it's not him, it's MVS. And when it's not him, it's Aaron Jones. And when it's not him, it's AJ Dillon. It's like he's like so down on the food chain. Can you really trust Robert Tonyan to be a starting tight end?
He's like one of those guys, like you basically need him to fall into the end zone with a 20-yard catch.
And he only gets like 3 balls a game. And he has to fall into the end zone. So he's really just a touchdown dependent tight end.
Right. Number 4, TJ Hawkinson, 141 points, averaged 8.9 points per game, played the full season, 0 games over 15 points, 7 games between 8 to 15, and then 9 games under 8. With no Kenny G, he became a little bit more involved in the offense, but I think now with Goff being the quarterback, he won't be as appealing, but now both big receivers are leaving the team. So, like, how are you feeling about TJ Hawkinson?
I had TJ Hawkinson last year. He's definitely a little frustrating to have, but he's so consistent. He gets like 10 to 13 points again, let alone that was with Stafford. Galladay was out. But people kind of forget Jared Goff was in the Super Bowl. Like the Lions, yes, they will suck, but Jared Goff is not that bad. And when Jared Goff played with the Rams, he was targeting Higbee, he was targeting Gerald Everett. I think that Hawkinson will actually be very good next season again too, and especially if Marvin Jones and Kenny Galladay opt out, they literally have no one else to throw the ball to. It's going to be run Swift and then a nice little cross to Hawkinson. So I think he's good for 10 points every week. I don't think he's going to have stellar performances, but I think he'll be just fine.
So it's going to be one of the situations where his team is so bad, he's forced to be good in fantasy.
Pretty much. He's going to get so many targets that he's going to be forced to make these catches.
Yeah. A guy you had on your team at one point, Brian, Mark Andrews, 141 points, averaged 10 points per game. Only played in 14 games this season, 3 games over 15. Honestly, he could have had more. He dropped a few touchdowns. 2 games between 8 to 15, and then 9 games under 8 points. He is by far Lamar's favorite target on the field. And with those dropped touchdowns, his point value isn't as high as it should be.
Yeah, I think the touchdowns will probably come back next season. I think Mark Andrews, again, will be a top 5 tight end. Because after Marquise Brown, there's no one else on the team. Who do you got? Willie Snead and Des Bryant. Like, can't really trust those guys in your offense. No. Let alone that Lamar Jackson doesn't really throw that much. But when he's in the red zone, it's either he's going to run it himself or he's going to look for Mark Andrews. And Marquise Brown's catching a lot of touchdowns at the end of the year. But I think that focus will probably be shifted over towards Mark Andrews in this upcoming year.
That's a fair establishment. So the guys 6 through 10. Logan Thomas, 140. Mike Gesicki, 132. Rob Gronkowski at 8. He was like one of those tight ends this year where it's just like every analyst was like, don't draft Rob Gronkowski. And most people were right at the beginning of the year, but then towards the end of the year, the dude just caught fire. Like basically the Bucks planned this the whole time, I felt like. But I also think that also is due to the fact O.J. Howard also went down full season injury to start the year too.
Well, the thing about Gronkowski is that they don't want to get him hurt. So beginning of the season, they're just going to make him a blocking tight end, wait for him to, fully develop, make sure he's healthy going in towards the playoffs, their last playoff push. And that's how they always do it anyways, like at least for now, because, beginning of the season, he didn't do anything. And then middle of the season, he started, getting a little bit more. And then Super Bowl comes, what does he do? Catches 2 touchdowns and just fully unleash Rob Gronkowski. So from a fantasy standpoint, Gronk's not amazing. He's going to have some pretty awful fantasy football games. But if you need like a 1 week or you want to stash him on your bench, like it's a pretty good spot to have. And
then you could also basically trade him to that hardcore Pats fan that loves Rob Gronkowski.
Exactly.
And then 9 and 10, Hayden Hurst and Jonnu Smith. I just feel like Hayden Hurst was really disappointing for what people wanted him to be. And then Jonnu Smith, I think if the team loses Corey Davis, he could see a raise in value because in the passing game will be A.J. Brown and then Jonnu Smith as the second option.
If you have Jonnu Smith and Hayden Hurst on the board, you take Jonnu Smith every single time. Hayden Hurst is just whatever it is about Hayden Hurst, I just don't like. He's just too inconsistent. Drops the passes, like catches balls for like 5 yards, and you might get like 4 or 5 catches, but it's probably for like 36 yards. Like you get no points out of that.
Yeah. Okay, so the ifs, ands, and buts for tight ends 2020. If George Kittle doesn't get injured, he missed half the season. It's hard to I want to believe he was projected for more points at this point, but with what he was doing, he was on pace for 154 points, which is about 9.6 points per game. He would have finished as a tight end 3 on that pace.
George Kittle's good. I mean, George Kittle's compared to Travis Kelce probably for the next 10 or so years until the next up-and-coming stud comes out of the draft. George Kittle's going to be fine. Again, he's going to be number 2. Definitely not number 1. Travis Kelce kind of has that locked up for the next couple of years. But he probably would have been, a top 3 tight end if he didn't get hurt. But it just so happened he did get hurt. So it sucked for a couple fantasy owners out there.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where George Kittle could easily put up Travis Kelce numbers. But Travis Kelce, because of the team he's on and the way it's developed offense, he doesn't have to worry about getting crunched every single play where George Kittle has to make outrageous catches for his production.
Exactly. You put George Kittle on the Chiefs and you put Travis Kelce on the 49ers. George Kittle is Travis Kelce and then vice versa.
Yeah. All right. This is a guy we both really wanted to have a great season, but we didn't get to see it. If the breakout happened, Brian, if Blake Jarwin doesn't get injured or Dak doesn't get injured, could have been a great year. When Dak was still healthy, Dalton Schultz was the tight end 8, averaging 10 points a game.
Blake Jarwin is talented. I believed in him from the start. He was going to be my starting tight end in 2 different leagues, and he just so happened to tear his ACL on the first game of the year. But I believe that he might even come back next year if the team's healthy, if everything goes smoothly, if he's good. I think that Blake Jarwin will also be a reliable fantasy tight end next year, and he'll probably be number 6. Dalton Schultz is a little bit worse than him, so I could see him at the number 6 spot. But then again, Cowboys could take it easy, come back from an injury, might do a 2 tight end threat, but it's kind of you got to read the news and see how they're going to, who's the tight end they're actually going to start.
Right. Okay, projecting the top 5 guys for 2021. Travis Kelce, no brainer. George Kittle at 2. Darren Waller at 3. Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson. Do you have any disagreement with that order?
It's probably spot on.
Do you have any guys that you might crack that top 5 that you might want?
I mean, maybe Hunter Henry, depending what team he goes to, because apparently he's also and Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz and Hunter Henry, depending on what team they go to, is going to play a huge fact on if they're going to be a reliable tight end this year.
So you still believe in Zach Ertz?
I still believe in Zach Ertz. I think that, what is wrong with Zach Ertz? He's been hurt. He came back. They used Dallas Goedert more. They didn't really give him the production, but Zach Ertz was always Zach Ertz before he got hurt. You put him on a team where he's still getting 8 to 9 targets. He's going to be up there. Maybe the touchdowns regress a little bit, but he'll be a reliable tight end 1 for a fantasy football team.
So speaking of actually his running mate who just said he's listed as the tight end 7 right now going to next year, Dallas Goedert. Do you see do you want Dallas Goedert on your team? Is he one of those mid to late round guys you're eyeing if you don't get one of the top guys?
Dallas Goedert's good. Jalen Hurts liked him too. And, Dallas Goedert was kind of that middle tier tight end that you could draft. And he was on my team and he was putting up, 10 to 15 points every week. He scores a lot of touchdowns. So I would have full confidence in taking him next year.
What about Logan Thomas?
Logan Thomas also gets a lot of balls too. He doesn't really get the touchdowns, but he gets a lot of grabs. When they're playing from behind, they love to do that 5-yard hitch where they just dump it off to him and then he just runs for 10 yards. So if you want a tight end that gets you 7 balls, 56 yards, and potentially a touchdown, I'd take Logan Thomas too.
Yeah, I feel out of all those, if you're going really, really late, Logan Thomas could be that guy. You're not going to get touchdowns. You just want to get those 5 points and guaranteed catches. Logan Thomas is the guy to target at the end of the draft. So I just want to talk about some food for thought at the tight end position, Brian. Because what we've seen is Travis Kelce has been so dominant that it feels like you have an extra player on your team because of how many more points he scores over the average position. So the top tight ends average 10.1 points per game. If you take out Kelsey and Waller from that average, they only average about 8.5. So that is half as many points as Kelsey normally gets and 6 less points than Waller normally gets. So what I've really tried to figure out is you need a top 3 tight end if you take him in the early rounds, which is 1 to 4. Because about the top 3 tight ends average about 13.6 points per game. So looking at where those guys go, who's around them. So your top 6 to 10 wide receivers average about 14 points per game. The top 11 to 20 who you'd be potentially taking over one of these tight ends only average 11.5. And then the receivers between 21 and 30 actually average 11. So that's only a half point difference. So basically, what I'm trying to say right here is it's better to take a chance on a guy who will be a top 3 tight end versus a wide receiver in the 11 to 30 range.
Yes. I also think that taking a tight end is very smart to take early. Reason being because all 3 of my leagues, the winner of that league had Travis Kelsey on their team. So what does that say? You got your receivers who are getting you got your stud receiver out there, then you got your 2-3 guy. But if you can plug Travis Kelsey into that and have a decent wide receiver core, you're almost guaranteed to win the championship if you have the guys surrounding you. And it's definitely proven in our league, in my other league, and my other league that I was in, because they all had Travis Kelsey in it. So what does that say? Take a tight end early because all the other tight ends suck.
You need the guy to be top 3 or top 4 to be significant, because the whole point is at the end of the day, fantasy is a numbers game. You want guys that are going to score more than their average position, and if you can get an extra 8 points at one position versus an extra half point or 3 points at another position, you want to go with the extra 8.
Yeah, you don't want to be that guy stuck with Robert Tonyan as your fantasy tight end, so make sure you draft them a little bit earlier than usual.
Right. So also in that same range, that goes for running backs too, because by the time you're taking your tight end or receivers, the top 15 running backs have gone. And 15 to 25 only average about 11.8. So it's the same argument. You want to go with the position that's going to get you more points versus the other guys at that same position.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
So do you have any last final remarks for this episode, Brian?
Get Travis Kelsey, George Kittle, or Darren Waller, your season's probably going to be tanked.
Yeah. So make sure to subscribe, and share. It's never too early to start working towards the next year. Follow the news every now and then. One big coaching change or a player signing can affect other players, so it's just some tea leaves you got to read before the season gets going. But as always, great presentation, Brian.